Welcome to Let's Talk Investing, a co-production of the Globe and Mail and the Investor Education Fund. I'm Rob Carrick, personal finance columnist at the Globe and Mail, and with me is Malcolm Hamilton. Malcolm is an actuary with Mercer and an expert on retirement and pension issues. Malcolm and I are going to talk about some trends in pensions in the workforce. Malcolm, what percentage of the Canadian workforce, I guess we can include public service government workers and then not include them, what percentage have pension coverage today?
Okay, it's better not to include them because in the public sector, more than 80% of the employees will be in a classic defined benefit pension plan. So there really isn't a coverage problem there. When you get to the private sector, it's a different story. At this point in time, it's probably about 30% of the employees in the private sector who are in any kind of a pension plan. And of that, only 20% are in the traditional defined benefit plan.
Let's just get you to give the viewers a description of the defined benefit versus the defined contribution, and which is more desirable from the worker's point of view.
Okay, well, the defined benefit, in essence, promises you a pension, and the pension may depend on how old you are when you retire, how long you've been working, how much you're paid, but it doesn't depend on how the pension fund performed, typically. So it's a guaranteed pension, in a sense. The defined contribution is more like a savings plan where the employer commits to putting a certain amount aside on your behalf, and you typically control the investment. If the investment does well, you end up with a lot of money. If the investments do badly, you don't end up with much.
So there's no guarantee of a certain benefit.
No guarantee of a certain benefit.
So what's the trend in terms of the breakdown of defined benefit and defined contribution plans? What changes are there in the proportion for both in the marketplace right now?
Well, in the private sector, the defined benefit plan has been in decline, and this isn't recent. This is probably 30 years of decline, and it isn't local. If you went to the US and the UK, you would see defined benefit plans in even more rapid decline in the private sector. Defined contribution plan's been going up, but it's probably not been going up as much as defined benefit's been going down.
Some companies are choosing to get out of the pension business altogether then?
They are, because if they have a defined benefit plan and they decide to exit, there are two choices. One, you have a defined contribution plan to replace it, or you exit the pension business. I think a number have decided to exit the pension business, but the number one reason for the demise of the defined benefit, it isn't so much companies with the plans getting rid of them as the fact that very, very few new successful companies are adopting pension plans as they grow.
Now, for the workers who have employers who are switching from defined benefit to defined contribution, explain the benefit to the employer of switching from one to the other, from the defined benefit to the defined contribution. Okay,
well, the employer is typically looking for at least one thing and maybe two. The one thing they're looking for is certainty about cost. With a defined contribution plan, if you commit to put 5% of pay aside for the worker, once you've put 5% of pay, you've paid for it. And if the investments do badly, that's not your problem. The defined benefit, you promise somebody a benefit, you set money aside to meet that cost, but if the money you set aside doesn't perform as well as you expect, then you're always going back to the well having to top it up. So employers have learned that with the defined benefit plan, they have a large risk that they don't have with defined contribution. Now, in addition, some of them are taking the opportunity as well to make the plan less expensive than it used to be. So not only is it less risk to the employer, but it's also less cost.
They're putting in less, is what you mean?
Putting in less, yes.
Last question for you, Malcolm. For the young worker just getting into the workforce, seeing all this pension turmoil, do you think that it would be smart for young workers, people just coming into the workforce, to pay a lot more attention to their personal retirement savings rather than taking the approach maybe their parents did and relying to a heavy extent on pensions?
I don't think young people ever paid very much attention to pensions, and I'm not sure they should. My advice to young people is typically concentrate on either getting out of debt and staying out of debt, and then once you're sort of debt-free, then worry about the retirement savings stuff. So it's really not natural for 20 and 30-year-olds with families and mortgages and lots of debt to spend a lot of time obsessed about retirement savings. And so I know this is sort of counter-trend. Usually they're told that they should be devoting their life to retirement savings, but I just don't think that's what they should be concentrating on.
All right, debt first, then retirement.
That would be my advice, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Malcolm.
You're welcome.